Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Missing Frames. This is the podcast where we watch all the movies we should have seen by this point in our lives. I'm your host, Shawn Eastridge. We're hanging out on the Nerd Party Network, a collection of podcasts dedicated to all things entertainment. Check it out at thenerdparty.com. You can go to Twitter and follow us at Join Nerd Party, and like the Facebook page, The Nerd Party. Follow us on Instagram at The Nerd Party. And since we are hitting another milestone episode 110, we are bringing back one Brad Gullickson. Hello, Brad.
Hello. I can't believe it's been another 10 episodes.
It feels, I don't even know when we did Cinema Paradiso, the 100th episode. It feels like it's been ages. It's been ages.
Yeah. You know, like, I feel like people are now anticipating my guest spots because I got like one of my first tweets from one of your listeners saying like, when are you coming back on? And man, one, I wish I could remember your name, listener. I've blanked on it right now. I'm a terrible person.
We love you. We love you. We swear we love you.
Like that affirmation that you gave me, I mean, like it boosted my ego tenfold. And I feel like this is my podcast now.
I think you should feel that way because the vibe I'm getting is that people don't listen unless you are on. So hurts me a little bit, but I understand. You're a great guest.
I'm listening every episode.
I am always, and I thank you for that, but I am always looking forward to these episodes. I love all my guests, but I there's a special spot in my heart for these anniversary episodes, for this tradition that we've kept going for as long, I mean, almost as long as Missing Frames has been around. It is
crazy. Like I wasn't there from the beginning. I was there from episode.
Technically, you only missed 2 because Dirty Harry was the 30th episode. So really, you've only missed the first 2 potential anniversary special landmark episodes. So
get me a time machine.
I should get you like a badge or something. Really?
Yes, I would. I would wear that badge proudly all through my apartment complex, and I'd go to the groceries wearing it. I'd wear it to the movies.
You'll get looks. It's gonna be. I'm gonna design something that will ensure people will try to stay away from you. So we are. If this is the first time tuning into a Brad episode, who are you? How have you not listened to any of those? Go back and check them out. It's easy. It's every 10th episode. So episode 100, 90, 80, 70, and so on and so forth, all the way back to episode 30. You can check them out. But what Brad and I have been doing, or at least trying to do, we didn't keep it up with Cinema Paradiso. That was kind of an exception. But Brad and I have been introducing each other to our personal favorite films. Brad dubbed them heart films. I love that term. So these are films that mean so much to us that we are cautiously, optimistically sharing with one another, hoping that the other party will not tear them apart.
And for the most part, that has worked out. I do want to say the way you phrase that about Cinema Paradiso makes it sound like Cinema Paradiso is not a heart movie. It
totally
definitely is.
But it was a situation where I think because it was, I don't remember whose turn. I've lost track.
It was your turn because 90 was Demon Night.
That's right. And Cinema Paradiso you had seen. So technically it was, I don't know if it was you introducing me, but because it was the 100th episode, we were like, we have to do something that celebrates cinema. So for sure, that's not to downplay what Cinema Paradiso was, but I don't think it was something you would have volunteered as one of your picks.
I mean, for your 100th episode, you basically betrayed your concept, but it was worth it.
It was worth it. And this is all to say it's my turn now. It's been, I can't believe, I think it's been a year since we did Demon Night. It's starting to feel like now, but the whole point is it's my turn to introduce you to another one of my heart movies. And this is a new heart movie for me. This is a recent discovery that like launched itself up into the stratosphere of films I love. And that is Wenders, Wings of Desire, or should we call it Vings of Desire? Wouldn't that be amazing though? Think about it. A movie called Vings of Desire that was just Ving Rhames starring in every role like it was being John Malkovich.
Okay, now you've won me back over. I was offended. and now I'm back in. Let's do this.
Let's do it. But this is let me give you a little rundown of what happened with me and Mr. Wenders. I also feel weird. I know that's how you pronounce his name, Wim Wenders, even though it's spelled Wim Wenders. So I don't know if he just doesn't know how to pronounce his name.
Oh
I'm
my
going to
God.
pronounce it that way because that seems to be the consensus. I still feel weird about it. I just want to get that out there. And plus, I like saying we Wimmy Wenders,
Oh,
and I
God.
can't say that with them. So I'm going to do it the right way, but please, I just had to get that off my chest because it still feels weird to me. But
I wonder if our listeners know that you're from America.
I don't think they know why they're listening to this, honestly. I think they are very, very confused. The first film of his I saw was Until the End of the World, which was recently the director's cut, not the theatrical cut. And if you don't know about this director's cut, it is a 5-hour epic that Criterion recently got a hold of and released on Blu-ray, I think just a few years ago. And last year when, the COVID lockdown first started, I had a couple close friends of mine, Dan Rayner and Christine Rigby, who have both been on the show. I was like, we should just watch some, go to the Criterion channel, find some movies that seem interesting to watch. And I'd heard about this film. I'd heard about its length. It sounded interesting and it had a great soundtrack. I was like, okay, these look like all the elements that would add up to a movie we might enjoy, even though its length is punishing. And so over the course of, I want to say 3 or 4 weekends, we watched Until the End of the World in bits and pieces. And we found the whole thing really baffling. To be fair, we were on a Skype call, so we weren't paying attention fully to the movie, and every so often we'd be like, what the hell is going on? And what did we miss? I don't understand. And this is all to say it wasn't the best introduction to him. It looked stunning. It was shot by Robbie Mueller, who was Wim Wenders' go-to DP, but it was really, really overwhelming, and it's very, very slow. I mean, it's a 5-hour long film, so there are stretches where you're like, what is even going on there? So we watched it and I was like, well, it looked amazing. I don't want to dismiss it entirely, but I'm not into it. I had a baby, so I've had the glorious privilege of being at home the past couple months, and I have just been, I've needed stuff to watch. I don't know if I'd seen some posts about Paris, Texas. I think Harry Dean Stanton's birthday was a few months ago, so there were a lot of dedications to him. Maybe I could be completely wrong about that, but it felt like I was seeing a lot of Paris, Texas popping up in my feeds on Twitter, on Instagram. On a whim, or should I say a vim,
oh God,
I decided, I'm sorry, Brad hates me so much. I decided to watch Paris, Texas. I was like, well, I hear great things about it. I'm just going to put it on. I did not know what to expect at all. Other than I knew other people had enjoyed it and Harry Dean Stanton was in it. And I was like, well, I didn't love Until the End of the World. Let's see how this goes. I put it on and it floored me. It was one of those amazing moments where you're watching a movie and without a doubt, oh, this is a heart film. This is one of my favorite movies. I only needed to watch it once to know that. Is there any movie you can think of where that's happened to you?
I like an instantaneous heart film.
Instantaneous love, where you're I know this is one of my favorite films, but I'm currently in the process of watching it. I just know I love it.
Yes. And at the time I didn't have the term heart film in my head. I just knew when I saw it, it was an instant classic. It was when I was in college and somebody on campus handed me a flyer to a new film. It was an advanced screening. It was going to be coming out in a month, and they were just getting college kid reactions to it. And, I'm a movie guy, so I go free movie, you got it. And it had a flyer. I love a flyer.
Ooh, yeah,
so I took the flyer, I went to the campus theater, and I watched Shaun of the Dead. And
for some reason, I knew you were going to say Shaun of the Dead. I don't know
good.
how.
Good. Probably because I've told this story. I watched that movie, and as I'm watching that movie, I'm going, oh my God, I am watching a masterpiece. People are going to be talking about this movie for the rest of my life. And I think history has proven that correctly, although I'm not dead yet. So we'll see. But
We'll see.
I think, Shaun of the Dead is a masterpiece.
Oh,
it's
yeah, for
still
sure.
my favorite Edgar Wright movie. And I kept hold of that flyer, and I have that flyer framed in my apartment with the movie ticket, the little college ticket.
I love that.
So yeah, I'm sure there's been other films like that, but that's the one where I felt the hand of God come out and touch me on the shoulder and go like, "You're watching something special, Brad."
I love that so much. Shaun of the Dead is such a perfect movie for that to be. I had a very similar experience with Shaun of the Dead. Like I would qualify that as like instant heart movie. But yeah, that halfway through Paris, Texas, I was like, oh my God, I completely misjudged Mr. Wenders. What else have we got? And the next night I was like, well, Wings of Desire, sure, okay, that looks interesting. And I put that on, and it was like I was texting Dan and Christine, like I was like, we've made a mistake. Like Wim Wenders is for real. Like this is, I connected so strongly with Paris, Texas, and then Wings of Desire just kind of opened up the doors on a whole other level. It was like the confirmation of like, oh, this is one of my favorite filmmakers, like without question. And Wings of Desire, as Paris, Texas did, jumped to the top of like favorite beloved movies for me, having only seen it once, but just feeling like so profoundly connected to it and so deeply moved by it. And it's hard to, I think as of right now, Paris, Texas is my favorite, but Wings of Desire is like, it's a toss up. And Wings of Desire is a different movie. It's a more poetic film. It's more visually, it feels like it's from another era. Like it somehow got, it's like a forgotten film, like a forgotten Bergman film with some weird kind of modern updates. Like I don't want to spoil things, but there's certain elements in it that are like, oh, this completely dates the movie in a strange way I'm not sure I love, but maybe I don't care because I love everything else about this movie so much. This is one that you've never seen, and which is shocking because you are so hard to pick movies for. Like it's so hard to find movies that you haven't seen, and I lucked out just by discovering the work of Wim Wenders and being so in love with it that this happened to be one of them. So tell me, Wings of Desire, what do you know about it? Is it or is it not just completely based around your knowledge of City of Angels, which was a loose remake of this movie?
Spoilers, but yes. I have seen City of Angels. And I did not hate City of Angels. I don't know if I can say that I loved City of Angels either, but I remember when that movie came out, it was lambasted, and anytime you remake a classic, you're going to get a lot of heat from the film critic community. That's all I really know about City of Angels, City of Angels, Wings of Desire. Wim Wenders is a director that I've always meant to go back and watch his whole canon. I have seen Paris, Texas. I agree. Paris, Texas is a masterpiece. It's my favorite Harry Dean Stanton film. By the way, his birthday was on the 14th of July.
Okay. So that timing does line up.
Yeah. And I think that Paris, Texas, if you like Paris, Texas, it pairs really well with Harry Dean Stanton's final film, Lucky. They feel like companion pieces. They make a great double feature. I've done it. I love it. Now, why did I not go back and watch all of Wim Wenders' films after I watched Paris, Texas? I don't know. Maybe it's because I love Harry Dean Stanton so much that was really the lens that I watched that movie with.
Yeah.
So that could possibly be the case. I've seen one other Wim Wenders movie, and that is The End of Violence, which came out in 1997. And I watched it as part of this massive Bill Pullman month-long marathon that I was doing for giggles. I
was gonna say, just admit that you wanted to do a Bill Pullman marathon.
I did. I do chronological marathons of actors all the time. I'm currently in the middle of a Tom Cruise chronological marathon.
Yes.
I'm really enjoying. My next film is Cocktail, which I've not seen. So we could be doing a Cocktail Missing Frames.
We could be doing that. I haven't seen it either.
Oh, well, we need to do that sometime. We need to do a Missing Frames where we find a film that neither of us has seen.
That'll be episode 120.
I like that idea. Put a pin in that. But The End of Violence is a really interesting movie. Pullman plays a film producer, and he's like a Joel Silver type. He makes really gnarly, violent movies, and then he finds this. He experiences something that's really, really horrific. And it's got a great cast. Rosalind Chow's in it. It's got a cameo from filmmaker Samuel Fuller. It's a super interesting movie. I don't know if it's necessarily like a masterpiece. It's certainly not a masterpiece. I don't even know if it's necessarily like a great movie, but it's a fascinating film. So all I know about Wenders is a hazy memory of the end of violence and a very strong memory of Paris, Texas, because I watch that all the time. It's a brilliant film. I would love to find another person and do a Missing Frames all about Paris, Texas.
Oh my God, seriously. I will make that happen. I would love to do
that.
I
mean, almost wanted to lie to you when you asked me if I had seen Paris, Texas, just to do it, because it's such a good movie.
Well, I appreciate that you didn't, because Missing Frames would have been shattered. It would have completely dismantled the entire podcast. But yeah, no, I would love to do that. I mean, the way I know that I'm really truly in love with a filmmaker or any, like, a music artist or anything like that is when I have their product readily available to me for quote unquote free. Like, and by free, I mean, I think practically every one of his movies is on the channel. It's on Criterion Channel. I think some of them are on HBO Max. They're available to me in multiple formats. But like the Criterion sale was going on, and I bought every single Wim Wenders Criterion film that is available on Blu-ray. I went into a fugue state, much like Travis in Paris, Texas. And when I woke up, I had a pile of Wim Wenders movies. But like I've seen all of those. I've seen his Road trilogy, those are amazing. I watched The American Friend, which is really interesting. I rewatched Until the End of the World and appreciated it more. But like I just rewatched Paris, Texas just out of necessity. I know I talked to you about like that feeling of like, oh, when I watch a movie I love, I don't necessarily want to repeatedly watch it because I want to preserve like what makes it special and feel like I'm watching it again for the first time. So this is the first time in a long time that I've rewatched a film that I have at home. Like I'll go to a movie theater and watch Avengers 5-6 times, but like that's the first time in a long time where I've like had a movie that is readily available to me that I've watched twice within a month. And Wings of Desire is kind of the same thing. I've been desperate to rewatch it. It's been on my mind constantly and I can't stop thinking about it. And it's moving and hypnotizing in a way that Paris, Texas kind of hints at. But it's a little bit more, I don't know if I want to say cerebral. It's more surreal is how I described it. It's a little bit more dreamlike than Paris, Texas. And Paris, Texas already has elements of that. It's also shot not by Robbie Mueller, who is amazing. One of my favorite DPs for sure, but Wings of Desire is not shot by him, strangely enough. It's Henry Alikin, who I think he was somebody who was making films through the 30s, 40s, 50s. This movie looks like something that would have been released in the 50s. Like it just feels like that. It doesn't feel of its time, with the exception of certain moments that I won't spoil. But do you want to try to guess what Wings of Desire is about?
Well,
and I will also say it's not quite the plot of City of Angels.
Okay.
I think, you have something to look forward to in that regard.
Like I have not seen City of Angels since it came out in the theater. So it's been a while. So even like my memory of that film is distant. So Nicolas Cage in that film and Wings of Desire is Bruno Ganz, right?
Yes, it is.
So I'm imagining he's an angel. And he visits humans on Earth. He watches, he observes them, and he becomes infatuated with Meg Ryan. And they strike up a relationship and a little bit of a forbidden romance.
Okay. I think this is a definite plot description of City of Angels, but that's okay. We will roll with it. And I don't know. What do you think? Are you expecting to like this? Are you excited to watch this? I know you were talking about you thought you'd seen it because the film's visuals are so striking and so familiar to any fan of cinema. Like they pop up everywhere.
Yeah. I am excited to watch it. I think it is a big blind spot for me, and I always love filling in a blind spot. And I imagine that I will like it because of its reputation. Will this be a case where I go, oh, okay, yeah, I can see why everyone loves that. I can see why Shawn loves that, but it's not for me, or I don't love it as much as they do. Or will this be a case like I always say Citizen Kane. I remember watching Citizen Kane finally after years and years, after decades of avoiding that film. And then I saw that film and I was like, oh my God, no, this is a great masterpiece of a movie. I love Citizen Kane. Why was I resisting it? So I think I'm going to fall into one of those camps.
I am excited to see which one you fall into. We will all find out very, very soon. So, Brad, let us break to watch Wings of Desire, and then we will return to discuss your thoughts. Stay tuned, everybody.
Now available to own on video cassette.
And we're back. Brad, tell me what you thought of Wings of Desire.
Oh man, this is always the most stressful part of these podcast episodes because, like I like the idea of, coming back. Well, can we have some banter? Can we talk about some other things? But no, you're just like, we're back. Let's ask the hard hitting questions.
Let's just rip the Band-Aid off.
Like Wings of Desire. And Brad thought Wings of Desire was really good.
Yeah, really good is good. I'll take really good. Not masterpiece though, or not great.
I mean, obviously based on my sounds, I would not classify it as a masterpiece. I do think that it is a movie that maybe I wasn't ready to watch at 11:30 at night, because that's what I did. I should have given a little more respect to the film and maybe started at 7, but just because of the way my life was, I couldn't make that happen. I did have to go see Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings.
See, so, I knew we were talking about before the show, we were going to find a way to get an MCU reference in here.
I had to go see the MCU movie first, and then I watched Wings and Desire. So it's a very strange double feature.
So if you start talking about just things that happened in Shang-Chi, or if you are and when Aquafina was on the trapeze and swinging around, I mean, that's just a heads up, listeners. That's what you're in for.
I almost just spoiled something about Shang-Chi, but I stopped myself. So I don't think I was in the best headspace to watch Wings of Desire. But that's just me making excuses of why maybe I wasn't bowled over by the film. But to start, I feel super defensive even starting in this place.
I know. I'm just waiting. Well, to be fair, I hyped this movie up a lot, and I because I do feel that way. I love it. I think it's great. I think there are things that I'm kind of I don't know how I feel about that. I was wondering how I would feel on the second viewing, if it would change, and if it would if I'd feel a little bit more oh no, because I love this movie so much, it all flows. But no, there are things I think particularly in the second half of the film where I'm a little okay, interesting.
Well, I want to talk about those. I don't know if I would necessarily classify anything as being flawed, but I do have questions about the movie, and I do wonder how the film will play on second watch, maybe earlier in the evening.
Maybe when you're not falling asleep. Just admit you slept through the movie.
No. Well, I actually did nod off at one point, but I rewound, or I skipped back.
No. I'm giving you a hard time. I'll be honest with you. As I mentioned in the first part of the show, since I have a baby now, my life is just chaos. So I watched my first viewing of Wings of Desire was in bits and pieces. I got through about 30 minutes, then had to go take care of him, then went and slept, then came back and watched another 30. So it's I'm just giving you a tough time.
Well, guess what? I don't like how any of this episode has started.
Let's just start over. So Wings of Desire. Brad, you thought it was really good?
I thought it was really good.
That's it.
I think the first thing you have to recognize and celebrate about the movie is its cinematography, right? Especially its black and white cinematography, which, first surprise about Wings of Desire, I did not know that there was going to be colored cinematography.
Yeah.
So that was a shock. And the way that starts to seep into the story periodically, I was super confused the first time. I was hold on, what was that? Just color? Did I just see color? Or am I
going
sleepy?
Insane? What's going on here? Yeah.
And then there's a moment with the trapeze artist where it fades into color, and that transition was really beautiful, really interesting. And then I started to go oh, I think I know what's happening with the color. And then of course, once he takes the plunge and becomes immortal, the world becomes colorful. And then you're like,
Right.
oh, I get it. I should go back and watch the movie from the beginning to see
Right. Yeah,
when the color starts to infect.
I was so enraptured with the film, so in love with it, that like when it started to turn into color, I was like you said, it was kind of like, oh, okay. But I didn't even question why. Like I think in the back of my mind, maybe I was thinking like, what is this a metaphor for? What does it mean? And obviously it's like, oh, the angels can't see in color. They can only see in black and white. And once he's human, now he's getting the richness of what the earth is capable of and the full spectrum of color and being human. But I was just so in love with the film that I was like, oh, it's in color now. I don't know why. I don't really care. It's just whatever you want to show me, I will accept fully, and I'm delighted by everything.
What's weird about color being the human perspective, because the first half of the movie, it is Bruno Ganz. He is infatuated with humanity, and he sees so much that he wants to be a part of, that once he takes the plunge and it goes into the color world, I actually feel like, as a film fan, I'm more in love with the black and white, especially the black and white cinematography of this film.
Yes.
That it doesn't really do for me what it does for Damien.
Yes, it's Damiel.
Damiel, thank you. Damien is the Omen child. I'm glad you corrected me.
Pretty close. Fallen angel, right? Lucifer, sure.
But the idea being that, like, I now suddenly don't have the experience that he does with the color. It doesn't convey that richness that he's experiencing the way that I was feeling it when he was falling in love through the black and white photography. I almost feel like, would it be more beneficial to my own emotional state if it was reversed, if it started in color and then went black and white, which like metaphorically seems like what shouldn't happen. Like on the page, that doesn't seem to sound like it should work, but just for my own like lust for cinema, that's what I would be grasping for, is that contrast of black and white.
Well, that I completely agree. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think I didn't even realize until you kind of verbalized it why that felt so weird to me. And you're right. It's because on paper, it makes sense that now that he's human, he is going to experience the richness of what humanity has to offer. But we've spent about an hour or more in this beautiful, poetic black and white world where it's just like absolutely stunning. So to your point, I had the same thing where I was so in love with the world that we were in with these angels, with the black and white cinematography, with all these visuals, that when it switched to color, it was almost like, oh, and now it's kind of a normal movie, even though it's not. It never becomes a normal movie, but it definitely felt a little bit like, oh, okay, well, now it's just color now.
And you see how desolate Berlin is during this time. And so it's in color. It's what he's always wanted. But now I'm looking at it and it's muddy as hell. And I just, no thanks.
But it's also like the black and white lends it this timelessness that once you go into color, it starts to feel very much like, oh, this is the 80s and this is an 80s film. And that's, there are like, what's her name puts on a Nick Cave record, and there are people handing like with 80s fashion and 80s clothes and 80s technology. But for me, the first viewing, it felt like this could have come from any era. Like it didn't feel like it was, in fact, not any era. It could have come from like the 40s, the 50s, just those lyrical cinema films like that are so concentrated on just visuals and almost silent in a way. Like they're focused on people's inner monologues and thoughts. Again, very much like French New Wave or Ingmar Bergman or those kinds of filmmakers. So that when it turns to color, I'm a little bit more like, oh, but I loved the kind of homage of what this film was, and that it felt more timeless.
Well, I
when
think
you
it
did
has
it that way.
to do with how much time you spend in the black and white world. It's supposed to be like the first time you watch Wizard of Oz and Dorothy arrives in the Munchkin village, opens the door and it's this colorful land and it's this explosion of beauty. And it feels that way because you spend only like 10 minutes in Kansas with the dreary, dust bowl-y black and white. But here you spend so much time, and that time in black and white is Damiel falling in love with humanity. So you as the audience fall in love with the humanity that you see through the black and white lens. Then when he wakes up and he, bashes his head and he has that little splash of blood on his hands and he tastes it, and like, it just doesn't have the power that I think that Wizard of Oz does because of the amount of time you spend. That being said, as the color portion continues and he finally connects with the trapeze artist, and I don't remember anybody's names. I've only watched it
that's
once.
okay.
But
that's okay.
He connects with the trapeze artist at the club during the Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds concert. And that's shot gorgeously. And she's got this awesome red dress on. So when they finally meet in the bar, suddenly like the color of her dress against the gold bar, like now the colors are starting to work for me. And, and I wonder on a second watch, just knowing the structure of the cinematography, if I will still feel the way that I do about, I missed the black and white, or now I kind of understand what he's trying to communicate here.
For sure. Well, on a second viewing, I can say I still miss the black and white. Like, I think I was kind of expecting going into the second viewing to be a little bit more like, since I knew it was coming, to be a bit more embracing of it. And to be clear, it's not like oh man, once it goes to color, the movie falls apart. I don't feel that way. It was just like you said, like we've described, it felt more lyrical when it was focused on like these angels moving through humanity. Once he becomes a part of the world, it feels less lyrical and more of a reality that was like, but I like the dreamlike stuff a little bit more.
Yeah, and you miss out on also the constant narration from everyone's thoughts. You get just a little bit, but not much more.
But it's so beautiful and it's so stunning. And I will say on a second viewing, it still was a little jarring for me. But I was so pulled in from the start with this poem by, I think it's Peter Hanke. Hanke? I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
I'm not going to correct you.
Yeah, don't correct me, please. Just let me believe. But I loved just hearing this in the translation of it, which is like when the child was a child and he believed in magic and he wondered all these questions, and this poem that keeps popping up throughout the film. But I loved just the idea. I mean, you open with this shot of, I think it's like it's showing Berlin, but then you show Damiel standing on the building just looking down, and it's just immediately iconic. Like I just had this moment of like, what year did this movie come out? I just felt so caught off guard and so incredibly in love with what I was seeing, and then I was so in for the ride. And I loved just the idea of there's something so haunting about the film, but it's the way it treats the angels. It's like you feel they're otherworldly, even though they're just essentially wearing trench coats and they have little ponytails. It's because of the music, the way they move through and the way they encourage and support people. But I loved the idea, the concept of just like all these people living their lives, and some people are suffering, some people are happy. There's the pregnant woman with the baby, and the father is thinking, I can't wait to meet the son and I wish I could take her pain away. It's just the film, by focusing on these inner monologues and giving the angels the ability to be the audience surrogate in a way, experiencing these monologues, I was just so moved by. And I was so moved by the concept of angels being there to like almost as encouragement, as support, whatever it is, but they're there to offer comfort.
Well,
and
what I
things
love
like that
about it is that you are seeing all of Berlin and you are witnessing how each little speck within this city is living an epic. And I think that there is a lot to gain from this movie, especially in 2021, when here in America we feel so divisive, right? And I think you could take this story and tell it again with a very 2021 political mindset, and really lean into the empathy that this film is exploring. Of course, I think you could take this movie and put it into a theater today and you would have the same effect. I'm not saying like we need remakes,
We got a remake.
We definitely don't need that remake. Now knowing the original film and having seen City of Angels, it's like insane to me the movie they did end up making.
Oh my god. I
Uh,
watched the trailer for City of Angels just because I haven't seen it, and I just wanted to see. I saw the similarities for sure, but man, I could tell immediately like, oh no, I'm not gonna like this, especially in lieu of loving Wings of Desire so much. I will turn into that like grumpy, like, this isn't the original, and the original is so beautiful, and it's what real cinema should be, and I'm
Well,
gonna
I mean,
become
like
that person.
this film is showing, the actions of certain people, and if you didn't have the glimpse into their interior life, you just go like, "What the hell is wrong with these human beings? What are they doing? Why is this guy being
Right.
a jerk?" But these angels see why that guy is being a jerk. They see why
Yeah.
that person is in despair. They understand why this person is anxious, why they're joyful, and I think that is something that we could all take into our daily lives when we're in behind the wheel of our car and somebody cuts you off and then you give them the finger or whatever. That
Yeah.
person is living their own world and we don't know what's going on, what trials and tribulations that person in the car is dealing with. And so like ease up on your anger towards that individual.
Yeah, I think there's something really beautiful about the idea of all these people being connected by this city and living out their lives and feeling all these things, but it's a stunning examination of humanity, and just like, again, like you're suggesting, on the surface something might appear to be one way, but inside there's a whole wealth of things going on that that person might not be conveying out
and
loud. And
and it's a very particular city, right? It's Berlin in the 80s when it is literally divided by the wall. And
exactly.
so division is at the heart of this story. And it's like it is a great metaphor for today.
Yes, absolutely. And I think just in terms of the moments and the moment to moment, like the monologues, and they're broken up by like certain scenes, and then Cassiel and Damiel will talk, or not, it's Cassiel, yeah,
Yeah,
Cassiel and
Cassiel and
Damiel
Damiel.
will talk about, like, I love them sitting in the car just like exchanging notes about like trivial things that
Mm.
they've noted, like that they find so beautiful about humanity, like this person just did this and I liked that, so I wanted to take note of it. Like, it's their jobs to essentially elevate the triviality of human life into something to be loved and respected. And it's to the point that Damiel is like, I want to be one of them, and I want to experience this for myself. I want to know what it's like to feel things. um I found the moment where the guy who, I guess he was in an accident, or he's dying
Yeah.
on the side of the road, and Damiel comes up to him and he's kind of thinking in his head about all the regrets, and Damiel kind of reaches out and touches him, and he just starts going through this slew of memories, like these beautiful, beautiful memories from his life as he's dying. Uh, that to me is one of the, like, the scenes I would use to sell Wings of Desire.
Yeah.
Not to spoil it for anybody, but I would say, like, this is why this film is so powerful and meaningful and beautiful to me. It's also encapsulated in that one moment. But are there any moments like that for you?
I mean that is probably my favorite moment from the movie,
Yeah.
because it is just it perfectly encapsulates what you can do with a story like this and with the idea of a guardian angel, uh, and the idea that in doing an act like this, in reliving and retelling this man's life to him as he fades away, it sparks an intense jealousy on the angel to having wanted to experience those things for himself.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just so incredibly powerful. I think you hit the nail on the head as of it being the scene of the movie. um, you know, we also have to talk about the trapeze artist. And the one scene in
Yes.
particular that I really love is Damiel watching the not her circus, but the children's circus
Yes.
with the animals and the goat and hanging out with the kids, and the kids can see him and he gets to partake in their joy with them. uh, that scene I think is also really beautiful. um Yeah. And then, I think the final shot or the final sequence of the movie where he is now a human and he is holding the rope for the trapeze artist, having now achieved everything that he wanted to achieve,
Yeah.
knowing that he is experiencing something that Cassiel and the other angels never will, and that it is worth taking the plunge and having a mortal life to be a part of these minuscule moments.
Absolutely. And I another scene that I think this is, I mean, I was so like the opening shot of the film again, and I don't think it's not the opening shot, but the shot of him that iconic
Yeah.
shot of him standing with the wings, that floored me. So like, I was just so like, holy, oh my God. I was like, this is just beautiful. I think the moment that really cemented my love for the film was the library sequence,
Yeah.
which again, like this is on paper, it's angels walk around library and that's it. Like angels walk around library observing humans, but the combination of the cinematography, of the actors, and the music in particular creates this like really stunning, unsettling, beautiful moment in this film. And I just remember being so like, that was the moment for me when we talk about when do you know you're watching like a movie you love, that library scene, which is only about maybe 20 minutes into it, was like, okay, this is one of my favorite movies. Like, I don't care where we go from here, I know this movie is going to have to do a lot of work to make me not love it. But were you as moved by that library scene, or am I
Yeah,
just crazy?
it's a great scene. I don't know if I was like, that's not the scene necessarily that I kind of went like, oh man, this is great. And
Right.
for me, that scene is again the ending sequence where he's
Mm.
finally there with the trapeze artist, and there's the shot where it's a wide shot. You see him and her on the rope, and then you have like a black and white corner on the stairs where Cassiel is sitting observing them.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like that moment for me is when I go like, okay, I'm giving this movie an A. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
it does culminate into its into that idea of why somebody who has experienced so much time but has not experienced human life would choose a finite existence over an endless existence.
For sure. Yeah. I love that moment. I think I missed, in terms of a second viewing, I missed him sitting there the first time. I don't know how I could, because it's such a like, the framing of it is such that you shouldn't miss that. But I don't know, maybe
Well, you're
again,
focused on the main character,
yeah, and
and
maybe also I was falling asleep like Brad often does
well,
when he watches movies for
yeah,
missing
and
frames.
Wim Wenders throws that shot away. He doesn't
He
linger
does,
on
which
those
I love. I
images.
love that too. I think that's part of its power and why it works so well, is because when you catch it, you're like, oh, that's so cool. There are a lot of things about the cinematography that I think just really impressed me. And part of it is there's some shots that I'm really not sure how they pulled off. There's one shot where we're like going early in the movie when it's the montage of like we're going through all these different apartments and hearing all these different stories. And then there's one shot where it's almost like the camera was handed out a window to somebody who's like standing, and you get an overhead shot of the little like apartment complex, like the area where the kids are playing, and then I don't know if the camera was handed off to somebody else in the next room, but like these single shots and just these
Yeah.
moments of like I imagine the implication is like, oh, you're the angel's point of view, like we're kind of gliding through these moments, and it really feels like that, but also to the point where like I'm amazed at some of the stuff they were able to pull off there.
Yeah, I mean it's a crazy gorgeous movie. I think on my first watch I wasn't really paying attention to some of those tricks the way that I would be on a second watch. I can't even remember the shot that you're referring to, but
Yeah,
I
it's
believe
very early
you.
on. There are a few moments like that where you're kind of watching and I mean, at least for me watching it the second time, just admiring the craft of it, where I'm like, I don't even know how you do this. But yeah, I think what's clear is we both really were moved and impressed with the first half of the film, and also not to dismiss the second half, but the movie does have a very specific dividing point, and I want to talk about the dividing point and what the second half of the film entails. And we already talked about like maybe not the shortcomings of it, but what kind of put us off about like what the second half of the movie does.
Why
and
it takes
how,
me the entire second half for me to understand why the second
Yeah.
half is the second half.
Exactly. And I think what's also interesting, and just talking about City of Angels, I mean, City of Angels exists and I could watch it. I don't think I ever, maybe I will someday if I don't know. I don't know why I would. Maybe I'm feeling self-destructive.
I'm definitely watching
but-
it again after watching Wings of Desire.
I,
It's happening.
I'm certainly curious, but after watching the trailer, I was like, you know what? I think I'm good. But City of Angels is for sure. Like, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, were you surprised at all that the movie, you described the plot as, the angel falls in love with the woman and he becomes human to be with her, which is the plot of Wings of Desire in a nutshell, but is not remotely descriptive of what the overall project is or what the overall experience is. But for City of Angels, for sure. So I think the second half of the film, when he becomes human, you would imagine that is like his meeting her at the very, very end, in the very last scene, is like, well, that's the entirety of City of Angels, is Nicolas Cage hanging out with Meg Ryan. Were you at all surprised that like it's a little bit more lingering, like it's just very slow build and they don't actually really interact until the very end of the movie? Like, were you expecting more convention?
I mean, as I'm watching the film is so not about the trapeze artist. Like she is one more trigger in firing the gun that will eventually make Damiel a human. Like she's one of the reasons why he takes the plunge, but she's not the only reason, and she is not the point of the movie. Like, their love is part of the point of the movie, but it's not the point of the movie the way that City of Angels makes it the point of the movie.
I also want to point out that Sylvie de Martin is her name.
Yeah, I'm not going to pronounce that, but correct.
Yeah, she plays Marion. She learned how to be a trapeze artist for this film.
I mean, she looks good on that rope.
She looks great on that rope. She's doing all of that. And there are many shots where, as I was watching, I didn't realize until afterwards, and I was looking up, trivia about the movie, but I remember watching it the first time and thinking, like, I don't know who the stunt woman is, but she looks just like her. They did a really great job. And then I realized, oh, that's her. She learned how to do a lot of this stuff. Like, I don't know specifically what moments would have been a stand-in, but for the most part, I think it is her up there doing all that. So more power to her. That's insane.
Yeah, and I would wonder, like, is that her in the shadow shot at the end?
That's a good question.
I don't know.
How do you feel about Peter Falk?
Yeah, so we haven't talked about him at all. I was like, when's Peter Falk coming up? Because if anything dates this movie, it's Columbo, right?
Yes.
And seeing Columbo in black and white on the plane, I'm just like, oh, right, Peter Falk. That's awesome. I love Peter Falk, and I think that anything he appears in is worth your
immediately
attention.
Elevated.
Yes, and is immediately elevated. And I think he's great in the movie. I was surprised when it was revealed that he was a former angel as well.
Yeah.
And
well, it's two things. It's that, but also at first it's like, is that Columbo? And then you realize it is, but also he's playing himself. He's playing Peter Falk. He's Peter Falk. So on many, many levels, it's like, wait a second. Okay. Peter Falk is playing himself in this movie. And he also is it's not hinted. It's explicitly stated that he was like, I used to be an angel. That was amazing. I was like, on so many levels, this is like something that should break a lesser movie, and somehow, especially in a movie that's so poetic and so thoughtful and dreamlike, to have something so strange.
It's
so almost strange. Like this. Yeah, it's like this should have broken this movie, but somehow it didn't. And I think a lot of it is because Peter Falk is just so. He's like your granddad. Like, it's so good to see him, and all the stuff he talks about like the cigarette and the coffee, and when you do them together, it's fantastic. Like, it's just so like good. These beautiful things. But
it definitely doesn't break the movie.
I wanted to hear Brad Gullickson's thoughts on Peter Falk and Wings of Desire.
It does change. Like, it does grind the film to a halt. Like, not in a negative way, but once they're really interacting and they're having a conversation, and he's like, I know you're there, I can feel you, but I can't see you. your mind is kind of exploding because of all the reasons you just said.
Yes.
And it really makes me just like, hold on, what kind of film are we watching? What's happening? Hold on.
Right.
Okay, so really, ultimately, he's just another push for Damiel to take the plunge.
Exactly.
And the first half of that film, all the movie is just a series of pushes, and then just Peter Falk as an angel happens to be another push. And so once you realize, okay, this is what's happening, I was able just to enjoy it. But there's like a 2-minute, 3-minute period there where I'm going like, and he's an angel? What?
I can't blame you. And again, I think it does come back to, like, to me, the strengths of this film and the things that stand out as the most iconic to me are the more angel focused stuff. So when we start to get more in the grounded earth stuff, it's not that I start to lose interest, but I'm more like, I want to spend more time like drifting around, meeting people, helping people, learning about, like, it starts to feel a little bit more concrete in that way, to the point where you are kind of like, wait, so this is, they're filming a movie, but also we're trying to like not talk this guy down from a suicide,
Yeah,
but like
like,
we're spending time with this guy, and like that's really emotional and powerful, and now we're with Peter Falk again. It's just it's a lot of things that on paper shouldn't work, but somehow it just, because the movie is, I don't know if it's because it's just doing so much or because it's just kind of given itself permission. Like Wenders is like, no, yeah, that's what this is now. And to be fair, he did not have a script for the movie, so I think that comes through in some of these things where it's like, where did that come from?
That makes sense. I mean, when we're watching the filming of the World War II detective movie that Peter Falk is making, I'm going, why are we spending so much time on set? Like,
Yeah.
like I want to get back to the angels. I want to stick around with this
Agreed.
suicide sequence. Like,
Yes.
like that's the movie. But now knowing that he was an angel, and he's given up immortality to be on this film set, to have a life that is here in the now, I'd like to revisit the film with that knowledge, and I think all of that would play out differently.
For sure. And I think bringing up City of Angels too, because City of Angels is very clearly a conventional film. Like, it's like, okay, this is what the angel wants and this is what he needs. He's in love and all this romance and stuff that will get butts in seats. I kind of like, even though it sounds like I'm being more critical about some aspects of this film, I wouldn't change a single thing. I love how overtly unconventional it is, how it is like, 1 second it's this, but then there's not really a driving plot, and then the romance of the film isn't really a driving romance, and it doesn't get fulfilled until the very end of the movie. I love that weirdness. I love the fact that we're playing in this realm of, not that anything can happen, but that the movie does not need to conform to a particular narrative kind, or like it doesn't need to conform to, all right, at this point we have to make sure that we do this because that's what the story needs to do. It just kind of, it's like a dream. It kind of drifts here and there, and then it's like, all right, well, now we're watching a Nick Cave concert because that's what we're doing.
So
and
good.
I want to say this movie I have in the past month or so just had a ridiculous Nick Cave obsession that I think this movie is to blame for.
Good.
I've been listening to a lot of his music, but like I think that was fun, again, going back to that and being like, yes, the moment that started it all. But yeah, this movie just goes here and there, and just, yeah, it's just these moments that you think in City of Angels are going to be like, you've got the, what's that song? Iris, whatever, the hell, the Goo Goo Dolls song.
Yeah.
You can see Nicolas Cage becoming a human and just running through the streets, trying to get to Meg Ryan as that song blares in the background. And I love that this movie is so vehemently opposed to being that movie.
Yeah. Like you talked about at the start of this conversation, how you have like some little flaws that kind of speak out to you. And I don't know if there's anything in this movie that I would call a flaw. I don't know if there's anything in this movie that I would change.
Yeah, I should be. Yeah, I'll take it back. I agree with you. I think things are weird, but I love that that's the case. I wouldn't change it.
It's just that you have to get used to what the film is doing. And I think if my mind had been more open on my first watch and maybe a little less tired, I would have flown with this film a little bit better.
Oh, I like what you did there.
But yes, thank you. English major. But in retrospect, the movie improves itself in my mind. And so I do think on the rewatch, this is a film that I could fall further and further in love with. It's just that first experience, I'm like, what's happening? Where are I? What kind of movie does this want to be? Oh no, the black and white cinematography, I miss it. Boo hoo.
Yeah, yep.
Why are we on this Nazi film set? What's going on? Like I was constantly like struggling and battling with what the movie was rather than just like chilling with it. And
it's funny because I felt not like as critical, and not that you're not coming across as overtly critical, but like I did feel a sense of that during my second viewing, strangely enough. My first viewing, I was just amazed by what I was seeing. And I think because sometimes I feel like we judge our favorite films more harshly every so often. And I think that's what I was doing the second time around, like being like, oh, do I love that now we're spending a lot of time with Damiel kind of wandering around as a human? And don't I want to be back? Like the things you're describing to me feel more apparent from my second viewing than my first viewing. And it's not like my opinion of the film has changed at all, but there are things that I think I was so just hypnotized by during my first viewing that I wasn't necessarily paying attention to the things that are like, I don't know how I feel about this. I don't know if I necessarily want to spend as much time on planet Earth with human Damiel as I do with Cassiel kind of wandering around.
I think it's the kind of movie where you are going to have scenes that you anticipate, and most of those scenes are probably going to be in the first half of the film.
Exactly. That's what I think I was surprised by. I was like, oh, most of the stuff I really, really thought I loved is in the first half of the film. But I also love me some Nick Cave. So again, like you're saying, I'm almost like, I got to watch it again. I got to just keep watching it and never stop.
Well, and that Nick Cave scene also for me is where I sat back up and I was like, oh, here we go. Now we're talking. Because I'm also a massive Nick Cave fan. I own every album. I've seen him in concert a half dozen times.
We need to have a conversation about this because I didn't realize what I was contending with. This is a whole other missing frame.
The best concert of my life was a Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds concert at the 930 Club. I was front row. And Nick Cave was singing into my face, and I was singing into Nick Cave's face.
I can't handle this. I can't. We need to talk about this later because otherwise, that's what this episode will become about.
And what's wild is like the only thing I ever knew about the Wings of Desire is that it had Nick Cave in it. And
that's funny because again, I didn't know that. So that was one of the things for me that like, did not take me out on the first viewing. Now that I expected it, and now that I this movie triggered a Nick Cave fan obsessiveness, it was more of a like, yes, here's Nick Cave. The first time I watched it didn't take me out of the movie, but it was definitely like, oh, Nick Cave concert. This is definitely the 80s. Like I was just like so enraptured with the timelessness of it that it was just like, okay, now that we're in color, it feels very, very much of its time. A little bit more like we're not trying to cover up, not that they were trying to cover up, but for some reason the black and white, maybe just the nature at its core of black and white cinematography is making it feel more like a timeless film. I think it threw me off a little bit the first time around, and this time around I was a little bit more like anticipating it and excited for it.
Well, like what I think now, as we're talking about this conversation, what I do like about the color is that when it comes, it does highlight the wall and like all the graffiti on the wall and just the Eastern bloc of it all is impossible to run away from in the color sequence. Whereas even though they talk about it in the black and white world, black and white portion of the movie, even though it's clearly visible in the black and white portion of the movie, you don't really like notice its all-consuming presence until the color section.
Because the angels it doesn't matter to them. They can transcend that. Like, and now that you're human, you are here and you cannot cross this boundary. But I love first of all him, it has a taste with the blood, but I love him just like this random guy walking down the street. He's like, you stop, what are all these colors? And this guy, what a wonderful world we could live in if like we could all be this guy, where this guy is not like concerned about this weird man holding a suit of armor or like a breastplate, who looks semi-homeless, who's asking him what the colors are. This guy is just totally like, oh yeah, that's blue, that's red. Like he's totally into it. I'm like, man, do I just need to move to Germany? Do I need to move to Berlin? Are people just like helping each other like this all the time?
You need to change your perspective. That's like the film, right? Like the
Yeah.
beauty he's seeing, the color he is seeing in that sequence is the graffiti on the Berlin Wall. Something that is represents total oppression of freedom and humanity, right? But here he is. The kids think he's a drunk. He's not a drunk. He is alive in a way that no one else in Berlin is alive at that moment. And he is seeing beauty in the wall. And like, you just, it just reminds you that, you know, when you're walking down the street and it's like a muddy, crappy day,
grungy, yeah,
find like if you're in the darkest and awfulest places, find the beauty in those awful places because they do exist.
Yeah, I love that so much. I love that interpretation of it. I want to talk a little bit about. There's a sequel to this film.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that too.
That's another thing that threw me off on my first viewing was the "to be continued" message. I was like, "What?"
I was like, "What is this? What? A college film?"
Yeah, I was just so baffled. I was like, "This movie is so perfect. Why do I need another?" What? So I looked it up and was like, oh my God, there's a sequel a few years later called Far Away, So Close, which focuses on Cassiel becoming a human and getting like caught up in the world of crime. And I haven't looked too closely at the plot because I think this is a film. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere. It doesn't seem to be readily available. Even the DVD on Amazon, I think, is like $50 because it's just like not readily available.
It's
to people.
I checked Just Watch. It's not on Just Watch.
It's not anywhere. So I desperately want to see this film. Willem Dafoe is in it. Like Peter Falk comes back. Bruno Ganz is back, and all these everyone's back. But it sounds a little more crazy. Like it sound like people did not love the movie when it came out, and based on some of the reviews I've read, it sounds like it's way more bonkers and almost like a comedy in a way. I would love to watch it. I don't know how I feel about that, but what are your thoughts on this sequel?
Well, I'm super like this. The same reason I want to watch City of Angels again. I want to watch Farewell So Close because I'm just super curious. I also looked on Wikipedia, looked up what it was about. That does not sound like the sequel to Wings of Desire that I want to see, but maybe that's a good thing because why would you want a repeat of this film? So I don't know. I always want to be the guy who defends the thing that the rest of the world says is garbage. So
that's how I feel too. And I think being so detached from the world in which Wings of Desire was released and being able to look back and say, oh, there's a sequel, and not necessarily being someone who's like, Wings of Desire is one of the best movies I've ever seen, and I can't wait for the sequel. What the hell was that? Like, I think because we're living in a time where we just have access to so many crazy bonkers things and so many bonkers ideas have happened that this just feels more like, oh yeah, I want to see what this is like. And I feel like I'll be more open-minded as a result of it, just having the ability to look back and say like, oh, this is a sequel that nobody really wanted. And also it sounds like nobody really liked, but maybe in retrospect, we can appreciate it a little bit more. Criterion, why don't we get on releasing that?
Yeah.
Like, where's the Criterion release?
It's got Peter Falk in it, apparently. So
it does. He's back. Yeah. Like everybody's back. So it's not like somebody else came along and was like, I'm going to write and direct a sequel. It's Wim Wenders. Like, he made the movie. So I would love to see it. I wish it was someplace I could see it. So yeah, I'm nervous about its more lighthearted nature, just because, obviously Wings of Desire, not that it's not lighthearted, but it is very, very solemn for much of its time and just like thoughtful. So I'm sure this would be an interesting contrast.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, it's like anytime you hit a home run, the second home run is just more difficult. Not impossible, but just more difficult.
More difficult. So, I mean, I think I've said all the things I love about Wings of Desire, the things I'm a little not put off by, but strike me as a little odd. Is there anything else we haven't touched on that you think demands discussion?
I'm going over my notes real quick. I don't think so. I think I've hit pretty much everything.
Okay.
Just speaking, like, another scene that I really enjoyed, and again, in retrospect, I enjoy even more. But on
Mm.
the film set, Peter Falk's character doing like sketches of people and being frustrated with how
Yeah.
terrible of an artist he is, knowing that he is an angel, now trying to perfect his line work is really delicious.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love that so much. I there's so many things, and as I continue to watch this film through the years, because like I said, this is 100% a heart film for me, and continue to like get used to the strange kind of whiplash effect of some of the tonal changes, and then the cinematography and the shifting of stories. Like I think I will only come to appreciate these little quirks and what am I trying to say? Eccentricities? I can't even say
Eccentric.
it.
Oh my
Eh,
God, you made me do it.
I can't
Uh,
do it. I can't do it. I will be more I will be more inclined to appreciate those little things, those little like all the little quirks and things that maybe feel more odd to me now. I feel like in the future I'll be like, that's why it's so good.
Eccentricities, Sean.
Eccentricities. God, what a
I had to
day.
say it after stumbling over it. I was like, I gotta put that
I
word.
can't even, I still can't say it.
Too funny.
Eccentricities. Man. All right. Well, I guess that's it. So on a scale of 1 to 5, let's just do Nick Cave concerts.
Oh man.
How many Nick Cave concerts would you give Wings of Desire on a scale from 1 to 5?
So I initially rated it 3.5. I do think, like, just talking about it with you and like defending my own, like, we came in at such a weird place where, one, I had to defend why I took a nap for a little bit, and why I didn't maybe call it a masterpiece. When you're like, Brad, why didn't you call Citizen Kane a masterpiece? Oh dear God, cops, I'm sorry. It's a weird place to start a conversation, but in starting there and starting with my like, oh, what? This is in color. I feel like I have discussed my way into loving the color change and
I was going to say,
appreciating
I
the
feel
color
like
change.
I didn't play it because I was coming to the conversation basically saying the same thing of like, yeah, the color stuff, I don't know. And you basically talked me and yourself into appreciating it even more. So
Right.
that was all you, man.
And so, like, I'm at a 3.5 is where I put it in my notes. It's like, okay, this is a 3.5. That's how I'm going to drop it into Letterboxd. And this is the first time, Sean, where I did not rate it on Letterboxd before recording, because I was like, I don't want to give any inkling to Sean on this film. So 3.5. I think I've talked myself up to 4.
Okay, great. I will give it. I still don't know if I'd give it a perfect 5, but I think 4.5 for sure. And I do think it is one of the most stunning films I've ever seen. It's one of my favorite films ever.
It is a
And
film where you're like, I need to own this.
yes, exactly. You can understand why after watching Paris, Texas, and then this, I was like, okay, Vim Wenders, I own everything now.
So
what have you done to me?
now you've brought up an interesting question, though, because you just mentioned Paris, Texas, which we talked a little bit about in the first part of this show. Do you rank this higher or lower than Paris, Texas? Two totally different films.
I think Paris, Texas is my favorite Wim Wenders film that I've seen.
Yeah.
However, I Wings of Desire is a close second. I would put them on the same pedestal for sure. Like I would say they're equal in terms of what I would dub as a masterpiece. Like I think they are on equal footing. I think Paris, Texas is just, I prefer it for some of the reasons we discussed as far as Wings of Desire's quote unquote shortcomings. But I think Wings of Desire just, I mean, it's even more amazing that I think this I don't know if it was the following film he did, but that this came out right after Paris, Texas, just a couple years later, because it's so different and it's so of its own ilk. Like it doesn't even feel in some ways like the same filmmaker. Like it strikes a different chord. Like there is some overlap for sure, but it strikes a different chord than Paris, Texas. But I think if I had to say which one, I would pick Paris, Texas still, as it sounds like you would too.
Well, yeah, I would, because that movie I fell hard for first watch, no issues. But I do think that if we were talking Paris, Texas today, and I had watched Paris, Texas after Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings at 11 o'clock at night, that would be another movie where I would struggle to figure out the rhythm of.
Yes.
And so
yeah.
I could see myself, if I had watched Wings of Desire first.
They could easily been traded.
Traded, yeah. Like I do think, even though they're both chasing different subjects and different, emotional states, I do think they have a similar vibe, and they feel very
I think so
much
too.
like Wenders movies.
I think I agree with that. I think you can certainly still see the traces of Wim Wenders, even though the films are so strikingly different in their content and even, their visuals and things like that. There's still something dreamlike about Paris, Texas that I think is reflected in Wings of Desire. And I love them both. How are you feeling about Wim Wenders? Are you going to go off and try to watch more? I know you're in the midst of a Tom Cruise marathon. I would hate to interrupt that.
I sound like a real rube, just talking MCU and Tom Cruise movies. I definitely think it's time to go watch some more Wim Wenders movies after I watch City of Angels.
Alice in the Cities.
Yeah. I'll do it.
Give it a shot. Well, that's it, Brad. As always, thank you for helping me with another anniversary episode. It's always a delight and a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah.
And let's just make every episode an anniversary episode. The next episode will be 120. We'll just skip everything in between. But Brad, you're doing so much out there on the internet. Tell everybody about the cool things you are doing, about your cool podcast, your writing, all of it.
Yeah, if you like my ramblings and you'd like to hear or read more of them, you can find me every day on Film School Rejects. I'm currently obsessing over, you guessed it, the MCU, doing all the writings on the What If cartoon, interviewing all the people behind the scenes of that cartoon series, having a lot of fun with it. And you can also find me with my wife hosting the comic book podcast, Comic Book Couples Counseling, at comicbookcouplescounseling.com, where we pair self-help books with your favorite comic book couples. So Scott Summers and Jean Grey, how about we figure them out using the 5 love languages from Gary Chapman? That's what we do over there. So comicbookcouplescounseling.com. And of course, you can find me on all social medias at MouthDork.
And I love all of these things. Everyone, please go check them out. As for where you can find me, I'm here on the Nerd Party, but I'm also on Twitter at YaySeanDoorman. You can find me on Letterboxd, SeanDoorman05, because somebody else, some jerk, is out there with my name running around on Letterboxd. But maybe this is an ally. Maybe I should reach out and stop treating them like my enemy.
Learn from Wings of Desire, Sean.
Learn from Wings of Desire. Let's look at the colors on the Berlin Wall together. But Shawn Doorman, if you're out there, let's figure this out. But yeah, Brad, thank you again. Always love having you on, and thank you everyone for listening. We will see you at the movies.